If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. The summer of 2023 was the driest Minnesota had seen in 40 years. Lake Minnewaska, typically a pristine mirror reflecting the towering pines of Whispering Shores Resort, had retreated nearly 30 feet from its normal shoreline. Patricia Kowalski had no idea that her morning walk with her golden retriever would uncover secrets buried for over 2 decades. On July 18th, as she strolled along the newly exposed lake bottom, her dog began digging frantically near a cluster of bleached tree stumps. What emerged from the mud wasn't driftwood or an old tire. It was a human skull, yellowed with age and partially embedded with fabric remnants. Kowalski immediately called 911, recognizing what she had found from countless crime shows. Pine County Sheriff's Detective Sarah Lindström arrived within 20 minutes, followed by the county coroner and a team from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. The skull belonged to a woman between 40-50 years old who had been deceased for 15 to 25 years. More disturbing was the evidence of blunt force trauma, fractures suggesting at least 2 separate impacts that would have been immediately fatal. DNA testing confirmed what investigators suspected. The remains belonged to Dr. Angela Foster, a University of Minnesota ecologist, who had vanished in September 2001. Foster had been the leading voice opposing the construction of Whispering Shores Resort, fighting to protect the lake's unique ecosystem and the rare orchid species that existed nowhere else in the state. The resort's owner, David Erickson, had arrived in Pine Haven in 1999 with ambitious plans and seemingly unlimited financing. The former Minneapolis real estate developer promised to bring prosperity to a town struggling after the local paper mill's closure. His vision required significant environmental modifications, draining wetlands and clearing old-growth forest, which put him in direct conflict with Foster. Foster had organized protests, filed environmental lawsuits, and lobbied state regulators to deny Erickson's construction permits. Her efforts delayed the project for nearly 2 years and cost Erickson millions in legal fees. The conflict grew intensely personal, with Erickson accusing Foster of environmental terrorism, while she countered that he was destroying irreplaceable natural heritage for profit. On September 15, 2001, Foster's Toyota pickup was found abandoned on Highway 29, 5 miles from her lakeside cabin. Her keys, wallet, and research notes were inside, but Foster had vanished without a trace. Despite extensive searches, no evidence of her fate was ever found. The case went cold, and Erickson's development proceeded as planned. Now, 22 years later, Detective Lindström reopened Foster's missing person case as a homicide investigation. Her first stop was Whispering Shores Resort, where she met with the now graying David Erickson. Walking with a cane following a 2019 stroke, Erickson maintained his innocence, claiming he deeply regretted that he and Foster couldn't find common ground. He provided a solid alibi for the night Foster disappeared. He was in Minneapolis attending his daughter's college graduation, with hotel records and photographs corroborating his presence. With Foster's remains identified, investigators expanded their search of the exposed lake bottom. Ground-penetrating radar revealed additional anomalies, and on July 25th, a second set of human remains surfaced just 50 yards from Foster's burial site. The second victim was Tommy Brennan, 34, a local construction worker who had disappeared in April 2003, just 2 months before the resort's grand opening. Brennan had worked on the resort's foundation during the final construction phases. His sister Marie had always suspected foul play, knowing that Tommy was reliable and would never have left town without telling family. Like Foster, Brennan had suffered fatal head trauma, but his remains showed evidence of hasty burial with construction materials, concrete chunks and rebar that matched materials used in the resort's foundation. The investigation revealed a troubling connection between the victims. Foster's research journals, stored at the University of Minnesota, contained notes from her final weeks showing she had been investigating more than just environmental damage. Her September 10, 2001 entry read, Soil samples from grid reference M7 show petroleum contamination levels exceeding EPA standards by 400%. Ericsson's environmental impact report claimed no soil contamination. Someone is covering up a major hazmat situation. Foster's notes indicated she had arranged to meet with a construction worker who claimed to have information about illegal dumping at the construction site. That worker was Tommy Brennan. His co-workers revealed that Tommy had become increasingly concerned about construction practices in his final weeks, finding buried barrels leaking chemicals where the main lodge foundation was being poured. When he reported it to management, they told him to keep quiet and just pour concrete over the contamination. Armed with this evidence, investigators obtained warrants to examine Whispering Shore's environmental records. What they discovered was a conspiracy spanning multiple agencies and contractors. The land had previously housed a chemical storage facility from 1957 to 1978, abandoned without proper environmental remediation when the company went bankrupt. Hundreds of barrels containing industrial solvents, pesticides, and heavy metals remained buried across the site. When Ericsson purchased the property in 1999, his environmental consultants discovered the contamination. Proper remediation would have cost $15 million, delayed construction for 3 years. Instead, Ericsson chose to conceal the contamination and build over it. Environmental consultant Robert Hayes admitted to falsifying soil reports in exchange for $50,000 in cash payments. Pine County Building Inspector William Tate acknowledged approving construction permits despite knowing about the contamination, explaining that Ericsson had offered to pay off his medical debts. Phone records revealed that on September 14, 2001, Tommy Brennan had called Dr. Foster and arranged to meet her at a secluded boat launch. Brennan planned to provide Foster with photographs of buried chemical barrels and internal company memos discussing the cover-up. Security camera footage from a nearby gas station, overlooked during the original investigation, showed Brennan's pickup truck at 8:47 p.m. on September 15th, followed 20 minutes later by a white Lincoln Town car registered to Whispering Shores Resort. The Lincoln was driven by Vincent "Vinny" Caruso, Ericsson's head of security and a former Minneapolis police detective with a history of excessive force complaints. Caruso had died of a heart attack in 2015, but his widow provided crucial testimony after being granted immunity. Susan Caruso revealed that Vinny had come home that night covered in mud, burned his clothes, and had his car detailed twice the next day. Investigators believe Caruso followed Brennan to the meeting site and killed both Foster and Brennan when their conversation threatened the resort project. Both victims were beaten with a tire iron found in Caruso's garage, a tool that matched the skull fractures. After the murders, Caruso weighted the bodies and dumped them in the lake's deepest section. Over time, the weights corroded and the bodies shifted with currents, eventually settling in shallower water exposed during the drought. As investigators processed the crime scenes, ground-penetrating radar detected another anomaly. On August 3, 2023, excavation revealed a third set of human remains belonging to Maria Santos, 29, a Mexican national who had worked as a housekeeper during the resort's first year of operation. Santos had disappeared in June 2004 after documenting guest illnesses consistent with chemical exposure from the buried contamination. Unlike the others, Santos showed signs of arsenic poisoning rather than blunt force trauma. Her apartment yielded a notebook recording guest complaints about chemical odors and illness symptoms in lower-level rooms built directly over the contamination. Santos had planned to report the guest illnesses to the health department, making her another threat to the resort's operation. The discovery triggered a massive environmental investigation. EPA testing revealed that groundwater contamination had spread throughout the resort and into Lake Minnewaska itself. 20 years of infiltration had created serious health risks, with former employees showing elevated levels of heavy metals and industrial solvents in their blood. The resort was immediately closed and designated a Superfund cleanup site, requiring $45 million in remediation. Recorded phone calls between Erickson and Caruso, discovered in Caruso's personal effects, revealed detailed discussions about eliminating problems that threatened the resort project. Financial records showed Erickson had paid Caruso an additional $75,000 in cash following each disappearance. David Erickson was arrested on August 15, 2023, and charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple environmental crimes. The revelations devastated Pine Haven's economy and social fabric. The resort had employed nearly 200 local residents and generated millions in tourism revenue. Its closure left the community facing economic uncertainty reminiscent of the 1990s mill closure. Property values plummeted as news of the contamination spread, leaving many longtime residents unable to sell homes they had planned to use for retirement. Environmental consultant Robert Hayes pleaded guilty and received 5 years in federal prison. Building inspector William Tate was sentenced to 3 years for accepting bribes. Families of the victims filed wrongful death lawsuits, while over 300 plaintiffs sought $200 million in damages for health impacts and property devaluation from the environmental contamination. On March 22, 2024, David Erickson was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. At 59, his empire had crumbled, his reputation destroyed, and his victims finally given justice. The former Whispering Shores property remains a fenced environmental cleanup site, with EPA projections suggesting remediation could take 15 years and cost more than $60 million. Dr. Angela Foster's environmental research was posthumously published, leading to stronger protections for Minnesota's wetland ecosystems through the Angela Foster Environmental Protection Act signed in 2024. Tommy Brennan's family established a scholarship fund for students pursuing construction and environmental safety careers. Maria Santos's story became part of immigrant rights advocacy, highlighting risks faced by undocumented workers reporting workplace violations. Pine Haven slowly began rebuilding its economy around sustainable tourism and environmental restoration. The community's painful experience became a cautionary tale about development built on deception. As Lake Minnewaska's water levels returned to normal following spring rains in 2024, the burial sites were once again submerged, but their stories had finally been told, their murders solved, and their killer brought to justice. The drought that exposed their remains had also exposed the truth. Sometimes the most devastating storms are the ones that reveal what has been hidden beneath still waters.